Oscar Piastri has just given the Formula One World Championship away in 2025. This is why I think it is very complicated, but you have to understand the dynamics here. There was an unusual penultimate race in Qatar where you could only do a maximum of 25 laps on one tyre. This threw up a very unusual situation, but it was predictable, where on lap 7, Nico Hülkenberg had a crash with Pierre Gasly. Hülkenberg causes a safety car. The pit lane is now open for cheap pit stops, but much cheaper than usual, because if you pit at lap 7, you can then pit again on lap 32 and you're done for the end of the race. If you don't pit on lap 7, you have to pit outside the safety car and then pit again in the race, also likely without safety car. Now, Piastri is leading the race. He's had a great start from pole position. He has a choice whether to box or not box. It's a bit like Abu Dhabi 2021, where I think Lewis Hamilton was in an impossible position, because if Lewis Hamilton had pitted, Max Verstappen may have stayed out and the safety car, it may have finished on the safety car. Lewis Hamilton stayed out, Verstappen pitted, and Verstappen got lucky because the safety car was shortened. We've made videos on this before on this channel. Now, what happened here is Piastri decides not to pit. Verstappen pits, get a free pit stop, and Lando Norris doesn't pit either. So Lando Norris gets one position on Max Verstappen, but Piastri and Lando lose a whole pit stop. I actually think this has worked out magnificently for Lando Norris, and McLaren a little bit behind it. McLaren really should have pitted both drivers, should have double stacked them, because you save a lot more even with the double stack than by having to pit another time without a safety car. Now, they didn't do this, I believe, because that would have meant double stacking Lando Norris. If they double stack Lando Norris, you could have a situation like we had with Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton in 2007 at McLaren, where Fernando Alonso just stayed in the pit box a little bit longer. They would have given that possibility to Oscar Piastri, and I think Oscar Piastri is actually a little bit ruthless. The way he went from Alpine to McLaren was very cunning and conniving, so I think he could have done that. So they decided to treat both cars equally and leave them out. This really hurt Oscar Piastri. I want to make this clear. If Oscar Piastri had won the race and Lando Norris had finished second, Oscar Piastri would have gained more in the championship than what actually happened, where Piastri finished second and Lando finished in P4. Now, Oscar Piastri's pace all weekend was unbelievable. Finished first in sprint quali, won the sprint race, finished first in the race, qualified first in the race, and had the fastest pace in the race, but somehow finished P2. So he should have taken that by the scruff of the neck and just dived into the pits, because he should have known the big, unusual opportunity that we've never seen before in F1 that existed in that moment of time. This was like Abu Dhabi 2021 levels of sophistication. And ironically, what this means is this, and this is crazy. If we have a situation in Abu Dhabi where Max Verstappen is in P1, okay, and Lando Norris is in P3, and Lando Norris is in P4, and Oscar Piastri is in P3, McLaren will have to tell Oscar Piastri to pull over and let Lando Norris through. I'm not sure anyone's talking about this, but McLaren will need to ask that to happen, because if Max Verstappen finishes P1 in Abu Dhabi, which looks likely, because I actually think Verstappen had more pace than Lando in the race stage generally, even without the free pit stop. If Verstappen wins and Norris finishes P4, Verstappen wins the championship, and that's almost like eternally embarrassing for McLaren that they let it slip. It's like Liverpool with Steven Gerrard. However, if Piastri's winning the race and Lando Norris is in P4, Lando wins the championship. Like, this is so bad for Oscar Piastri, and I'm struggling to understand how he allowed this to happen when he was so fast in Qatar. He was unbelievably quick in Qatar. He has been it's been a bit of a screw job, I think, and McLaren's decision to not pit both cars when everyone else pitted, and by the way, I think everyone else was always going to pit, because the other cars didn't seem to really be in a race with the McLarens, actually. So if no one was going to try and stay out, because everyone else was in the race with all of their other, midfield rivals. They weren't going to try and get track position on the McLarens. That would just be irrelevant, because the McLarens would overtake them. So I thought it was inevitable that everyone else was going to pit. Even Ocon, who stayed out, it wasn't going to be a problem for Max Verstappen to overtake Ocon pretty much immediately on the restart. So McLaren, by not wanting to compromise Lando Norris through the double stack, they actually ended up screwing over Oscar Piastri, because McLaren should have ensured that Oscar Piastri won this race. And I think Oscar Piastri will never forgive McLaren for this. Yes, we can talk about things that happened at Monza. We can talk about the bad luck that happened for Piastri in Melbourne, but Verstappen also had bad luck in Austria. Lando also had bad luck in Zandvoort. But I think when you add up Monza and you add up what happened here, that has cost Oscar Piastri the championship. I cannot see him winning. And I think this is basically on for Lando because they're going to ask Piastri to pull over and let Norris through. Let me know what you think in the comments and make sure to subscribe to Formula Fan TV for more.